it kind of brings it in an interesting full circle for me, because the intervening years between law school and becoming a full-time artist were really unhappy for me. I graduated from law school and went to Seattle, where I practiced corporate law. And the last case I worked on for 3 years was representing British Petroleum in a pipeline explosion case. And I never liked practicing law ever since the beginning, but as it got further and further into my career as a lawyer, I became more and more unhappy, more and more angry, more and more alienated, and started thinking fairly frequently about committing suicide, because I just felt completely stuck in what I was doing. And every couple of years I'd take out the yellow pages of the phone book and go through the entire phone book, line by line, thinking of is there anywhere else I could go work? It didn't occur to me I could work for myself. And I just, I didn't see a way out. And all around me, I saw brilliant people coming through town, and musicians giving concerts, and authors releasing their books, and artists having exhibitions, and I felt like I was dying inside, slowly but surely. And I started to be able to see what the rest of my life was going to look like. And finally, my fear of leaving the practice of law and taking the risk of doing my artwork was finally trumped by a much bigger fear, and that was the fear of not living my life. And so that was what enabled me to, it wasn't really courage, I was just motivated by fear, but enabled me to take the step of getting out. And at the time, and for all the years I was in law school, and for probably, 10 years before that, I was pretty passionately interested in photography ever since I was in high school. And what I was photographing all that time was, I was kind of equally detached from the world as I was when I was a lawyer. I was living very much in the consumer lifestyle. I didn't vote. I didn't have any kind of engagement as an activist, and I wasn't interested in that stuff. So when I'd buy a brand new stereo with a pair of rosewood speaker cabinets, and my friends would start talking to me about the Brazilian rainforest, it's like, don't tell me about that. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to feel guilty. So I was just living this very detached lifestyle, and the work I was doing at the time photographically kind of reflected that. I would go out and take beautiful photographs of these little details out in the world, of reflections in puddles, and moss growing from out of a drain pipe in an alley, and work that was really just about beauty, but it was a detached kind of beauty. And so one of the places where I would find this kind of beauty, and it was all about color. My work was all in color, and I had a theory about color that I was applying at the time. It was one of those artistic theories that when you go read it on the gallery wall, you read the artist statement, and you have no idea what they're talking about. It's like one of those. Just this very kind of hoity-toity theory that I don't even really remember what it was about, but I like to affectionately remember it as my cosmic color theory, because it was one of those artist statements that has the word universe in it. Always be suspicious if you read an art statement where they're trying to connect with the entire universe. And so I would go out looking for this particular kind of color that fit my cosmic color theory. And one of the places that I found that kind of color was in these industrial yards with huge stacks of shipping containers and rail cars and industrial, big industrial stuff that had this really beautiful kind of color to it. And so I'd go out there making these kind of photographs, and during that process, I found this scene and took that photograph. And the only reason I took this photograph is because I thought the color was really cool. It was, and actually this was a different kind of color palette than I had ever photographed before. All the previous ones were very primary colors, like big stacks of shipping containers where one is red and one is green and one is yellow. And this was kind of a more complex palette of color. And if you look at only the color without thinking about the subject, it kind of looked to me almost like an impressionist painting. And so I thought, this is the best picture I've ever taken from the point of view of my cosmic color theory. And so I made a big print of this photograph, and I hung it on the wall in my studio. And at the time I was doing this work, I was printing for a couple of other photographers, and I thought that's what my career was going to be about. That I'd print for other photographers and keep doing my cosmic color work and maybe have an exhibition here and there. And both of these photographers are internationally well-known photographic activists. And I was printing for their exhibitions. And they were both over one day picking up their prints from my studio. And as soon as they walked in, they walked right up to this piece and they started talking about mass consumption. And it was kind of annoying to me at the time because they were misinterpreting my work. So I started telling them, well, you know, I'm not really interested in mass consumption, but look at the cosmic, you know, and I started talking about the cosmic color theory. And they'd both heard it already and they weren't that interested in it. And so one of them, in a really sweet way, just came and put his arm around my shoulder and he said, Chris, you know, maybe it's just luck, but you finally made a relevant photograph. And he encouraged me to follow this as a thread. And he said, what I see when I look at this photograph is a macabre portrait of America. And that kind of sunk in, and I thought, okay, well, I know where to find these piles. I'm going to go back and do some more of them. And as I began going back and making a study of the detritus of our mass consumption, I began reading about it as well. And I discovered to my astonishment that there's this vast body of literature out there written by these visionary people going back like 100 years in our culture to far before when mass consumption really got rolling, as it has just in the last few decades. Visionary Americans who have been warning us about the deadening and destructive effects of overconsumption on our environment and on our culture and on our individual spirits. And it was really bizarre to read these books and articles because they talked about the way American culture is kind of lost in this vision of what happiness is, which is the gaining of material wealth. And they talked about these professions in the United States where people work really long hours, like in the legal profession and business people, and gain tremendous amounts of wealth, but they're not happy. And so I remember reading an article that talked about the high rate of anxiety and suicide among wealthy professionals. And articles that talk about the millions of wealthy people in the United States who are on antidepressants. And these books were supposed to be written about our culture, but they might as well have been written about me personally. And I began to see for the first time that the lifestyle that I had been leading as a lawyer all this time, that's why I'd been so unhappy. This issue of our mass consumption and the kind of lostness of American culture began to kind of clear in front of me like a fog. And the more I learned about it, the more alarmed I began to become. But you know, I began to learn about, to be able to kind of see, like waking up from the matrix and see the enormity of this problem and how much it's affecting us and the rest of the people around the world as well.